David Nixon joining us now, dual threat analyst on BYUtv, former BYU football standout, NFL player, and basketball connoisseur. David, let's start with that Twitter question. Why is or why isn't BYU a lock for the NCAA tournament?
Well, I think BYU gets in, but to call it a lock, I think is a little far stretch. I'm not sure if they're quite a lock. I think BYU has to obviously, hope Temple, Texas, Indiana, those type of teams drop here in their conference tournaments that and then helps BYU kind of springboard into the tournament. But I wouldn't call it a lock, but I think they have a great chance.
So you agree with me, as you very well will. We're a band of brothers. We see eye to eye on a lot of things, unlike Spencer. And I'm not just saying that because he's taller than me.
Lock.
But do you think there's anything that that this basketball team has done this year that could help them get in and not rely on somebody else?
Well, I think obviously everyone looks at the Gonzaga game, but I think it's how BYU finished, and when they did have a healthy lineup, what they were able to accomplish there in conference, their last stretch run. And I know everyone keeps saying when the committee looks at the body of work the entire season, but BYU having Nate Austin gone, and then guys being shuffled in and out, with Anton Winder being out, and of course Chase Fisher was out a few games. I mean, there were a lot of injuries being shuffled in and out, but when BYU was full strength, they put the great product on the court, and the results came with it, with a great run streak there at the end of the tournament, and then leading all the way up to the championship game. So hopefully the tournament committee sees that and gives BYU the nod, because and Mark Few mentioned in his post-game press conference after the championship game that BYU is a great team, and they're firing all cylinders, and they're a tough team to match up with, and that they do go to the tournament, they're going to surprise a lot of people, make a run. So, looking at Twitter after the game, BYU's game against Gonzaga in the championship game, you saw a lot of guys were impressed with BYU and how they hung with them. Obviously, the score kind of got a hand late, but I think a lot of people saw the fight in this BYU team that will hopefully weigh heavily on those committees' mind as it comes time this Sunday for Selection Sunday.
David Nixon, dual threat analyst for BYUtv on BYU Sports Nation. You were at the West Coast Conference Tournament final, David, with a former BYU basketball player and one of your business partners, Jimmy Balderson. What was your conversation like after the game and it had gone final in favor of Gonzaga 91-75?
Jimmy's a great buddy of mine, and it's fun to pick his brain while watching the games, because he watches basketball games much like I watch football games, and he kind of looks at the details of the game. I think BYU was just outmatched with Gonzaga's Karnowski down low. He was just a beast, and it was tough for BYU to match up with him. And then of course, Jimmy was mentioned, if you go down there and try to double team him, then he pops it out to the great shooters with Bell and Pangos on the outside and Wiltshire, who are going to knock down threes, which they did. So because Gonzaga's just a tough team to match up, and that's why they're top 5 in the country is because they are just that. They're a tough team to match up against. It was one of those losses where the first half you felt like we were going back and forth trading punches, but that second half we just didn't have an answer for down low, and unfortunately kind of got away. But I think BYU fans can walk away with their heads high, knowing that we went into the kennel, went up to their place and put a loss on them on their senior night. Makes everything feel much better.
David, did you and Jimmy have a discussion on the Cougars getting into the tournament and if they had a chance, if they're locked in, and how far they would be able to make a run?
Jimmy was part of the team that played Xavier his senior year. I think that was 07 or 06, and he likens this team under that team, where kind of flying underneath the radar, but he feels that they'll get in. I feel that they'll get in. But I tell you what, it's tough with the way the WCC is, where it ends on Tuesday, and you've got the 5 days off to where you have to sit around and wait, and you sometimes wonder, is that kind of a detriment to the team, and the fact that you're kind of out of sight, out of mind with a lot of these guys, because you played forever ago, and all of a sudden you've got these Mountain West Conference and Pac-12 and all these other conferences going on right now, and they're going to be more fresh in the community's mind. Hopefully not. But, I don't know if that's necessarily helping BYU at this point. But it's one of those things where you just got to sit around and wait. And believe me, I'm desperately hoping that BYU can sneak in there.
Talking with David Nixon on BYU Sports Nation. David, we heard that you slow-clapped the BYU women's basketball team. Can you confirm or deny that report?
I can confirm. Jimmy and I were on the same flight back to Salt Lake with the BYU women's basketball team, and they were walking on the plane with their conference champion shirts, and Jimmy and I were laughing. We started slow clapping them, and nobody really caught up. But a few of the girls gave us kind of a few grins, and they laughed about it. But hey, I'm glad somebody could pull through in that championship game, and glad to see that they're moving on also.
Let's switch gears now, David, and talk some spring football, because apparently you know a thing or two about the gridiron. When you look at BYU, it's hard not to think about Taysom Hill and coming off of that injury. Well, he says last week, if there were a game on Saturday, I could play. What do you read into that statement from the quarterback, Taysom Hill, coming off of a broken leg?
I think he's speaking the truth. I mean, I've been around him a lot, and he said it's coming along well. It feels good. He mentioned in the same interview that, hey, look, I wouldn't be full speed, full strength in the way that I would like to go out there and play. But I believe him. I think he could go out there and he could probably sit back in the pocket and, sling the rock around. I mean, it reminds me of my days with John Beck when he had 2 high ankle sprains that happened against Boston College. And sure enough, he came out the next few games and he couldn't move around very well, but his arm was still functioning pretty well, and he was still able to pick apart defenses. And I think the same with Taysom. I mean, he's got a strong arm, and while that ankle is still healing and would probably still have some issues, he wouldn't be able to run around as much. I still think he'd be able to distribute the ball, and I think this BYU team, if they had to play tomorrow, I think they'd want him out there. I think obviously he's the best option, and not a lot of depth behind there, but I don't put anything past Taysom, knowing him personally, and obviously watching what he puts on the field. I think if he wanted to be out there, he'd find a way to be out there and still put a good product out there.
David, it's all nice to talk about the best player in the universe, but let's switch over to the side of the ball that really matters most, the defense. If BYU could improve on one specific area through spring ball, where do you think it would be?
This is something that obviously people are going to be like, oh, well, of course he says this. But, of course, I say linebackers. And for me, it's not necessarily the outside where I played, but it's the inside. It's something that I think BYU's team was lacking last year was as a presence, a leader, and just kind of that rock right there in the middle in the middle backer spot. And this year I was actually down there and chatted with Harvey Longy, and we were chatting, and I said, look, you've got to be, or somebody's got to step up and be that guy. They got to be the Cameron Jensen, the general, or the Waniunga, the playmaker, because we talk about all the time that this 3-4 defense, everything's funneled to those middle backers. And last year, there was so much turnover at that position that nobody ever cemented the leadership role. And it hurt the BYU defense because you never had those middle backers that could actually flow to the ball and make plays. And so talking to Harvey, I said, look, I don't know if it's you or somebody, but I said the opportunity is right for you to go out there and take take the bull by the horns and become that guy. And he agreed, and he said that's what he's working for. But there's a lot of guys that can obviously throw their hat in the ring and come out with it. It'll be interesting to see who emerges. Obviously, Manoa Pakula is kind of the top guy there, but the position's wide open. And I think for the BYU defense, in order for it to get back to its dominating ways, which it was in Brian and I's days, it's got to have that middle backer, the guy that's calling all the plays, calling all the checks, and just that leader, really. You've got Bronson, you've got Remington Peck, you got Kaiden on the back end. So you've got some guys that can lead, but once again, you always need that leadership role at the middle backer spot too. So that's where I'm looking to see who emerges and who becomes the guy going forward, because once again, I think that is the main issue with that BYU defense. And having Coach Mendenhall back there coaching them again and lighting the fire underneath them, I'm excited to see exactly who emerges and who are those 11 guys that are going to step out on that field come September.
All right, David, great to talk to you, man. Go Fast, Go Hard edition. Just tell me who the leading tackler is going to be next year, the next time we talk. Think about that, and then we'll discuss later.
All right, I like it.
All right, David.
Okay, take care, guys.